Retail inflation is at a 6-year low of 2.1%. But have your own expenses grown at a far quicker rate than official national data suggests? And if you feel that pinch, why this difference between official data and how quickly your own expenses are growing? If national average data for inflation shows a far lower rate of inflation compared to how quickly your own expenses are growing, it is highly likely that the basket of items that are used to calculate CPI, a consumer price index based retail inflation, is not truly reflective of daily use items. But before we get to that, here are some basics. The CPI, or the consumer price index, reflects how much households need to spend on a fixed basket of goods and services that they typically consume, such as food, clothing, housing, and fuel. In India, the CPI is compiled by the National Statistical Office, or the NSO, under the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, and is currently calculated using the base year 2012. By tracking the cost of this basket over time, the CPI shows how prices rise or fall, affecting the purchasing power of consumers and their overall welfare. According to the ministry, the CPI measures price changes by comparing the current cost of this fixed basket of goods and services with what they used to cost in a previous period. Since the quantity and quality of all these items in the basket are kept constant, any change in this index is reflective only of the change in prices. Obviously, when prices increase, the CPI goes up, signaling inflation. When prices dip, the CPI also declines, indicating deflation. Originally, the CPI figures were developed to track changes in the cost of living for workers so that the wages could be adjusted in line with price movements. Over time, however, the CPI has evolved into a widely used macroeconomic tool. The CPI is now a key benchmark that helps target inflation, monitor price stability, and guide the monetary policy decisions of the Reserve Bank of India. Now, what constitutes this basket of goods and services from which the government calculates retail inflation? A pictorial representation from the site smallcase.com gives us a visual idea. As seen in the chart on your screens, food takes up the greatest weight at almost 46%. Housing, clothing and footwear, and fuel and light follow food in terms of weightage. Now, why such a significant amount of weightage for food? In the early days, a significant portion of our incomes would have been spent on food. And at that time, this kind of weightage to calculate inflation would have reflected reality, but things are changing on the ground now. Now, what segments could throw up sudden surprises when it comes to calculating retail inflation? Food and transport are the segments where there could be a sudden spike in prices. After all, for example, if rainfall has been declared as above average or average across the country, it is possible that it is high in some regions and scanty in others. Scanty in regions where a particular produce is harvested. Then, if supply becomes an issue there, prices could rise, thereby spurring overall inflation. International prices of crude oil, as another example, could influence the cost of transport for us. Central banks seek to temper higher inflation by raising rates so that they dampen demand. These guardians of prices tend to look at core inflation, that is, inflation that does not include food or oil price impact, as much as they take into account overall inflation, or what is called headline inflation, into consideration. After all, if onions that have to travel from one part of the country to another are impacted by the rains or a trucker's strike, no amount of tweaking of benchmark rates by the RBI is going to help. The chart on your screens shows an example of how onion prices have seesawed over time. This has been taken from the dataforindia.com website. Also, our incomes have to rise at a rate faster than inflation if the quality of our lives has to keep improving. If my salary grows at 3% but inflation is at 5%, then I'm less able to afford the same items that I was able to comfortably buy the previous year. Using the same numbers, if my salary were at 100 rupees and my increments are such that I got the 3% increment, so it's about 103 now, but inflation was at 5%, then the effective value of the cash in hand that I have now is only 98 rupees. So 103 is my nominal income, but my real income is much lesser. From the same website, here is a pictorial view of how real incomes have grown compared with nominal incomes, that is, incomes without taking inflation into consideration. For a male agricultural laborer, last year's national daily wage touched almost rupees 400, but if you take into account inflation, the value of that income was just short of rupees 250. Now, are there changes brewing in how CPI is calculated? The CPI basket currently has items that may have no consequence in our daily lives, and there probably lies the answer to the original question for this video. Are your own expenses accelerating at a rate far quicker than what official data on inflation suggests? According to a 2021 analysis by the site ideasforindia.com, the CPI underestimates expenses on several counts, but especially in terms of household expenses on one of the largest commodity groupings, transport and communication. It underestimates this segment by 4 to 5 percentage points. Last year, the government released the findings of its Household Consumption Survey of 2022-23, which showed that people are spending less now versus earlier, less on cereals but more on processed food, clothing, health services, and consumer durables. A washing machine or a microwave oven are examples of consumer durables. The CPI currently has 299 items that are considered for the calculation. The government is looking to pull out redundant items from the index, such as horse cart prices, prices for video cassette recorders, and costs of audio cassettes, and add others that are more relevant. A Bloomberg article from last year tells us that the government may also include consumer electronic products, such as smartphones, in the updated index. The base year used for the calculation will also change from 2012 to 2024 to reflect daily expenses as of today than what it was 13 years ago. These changes will come into effect expectedly by early 2026. That brings us to the nuggets of information that we have for you for each episode. Did you know that some countries have struggled with hyperinflation? In 2008, Zimbabwe experienced one of the worst cases of hyperinflation ever, with estimated annual inflation at one point of 500 billion%. Such high levels of inflation have been disastrous, and countries have had to take difficult and painful policy measures to bring inflation back to reasonable levels, sometimes by giving up their national currency as Zimbabwe had. Now here's a quiz question for this week. In April 2024, Zimbabwe rolled out a new currency following a prolonged period of hyperinflation that devalued the existing currency. What was the new currency called? And the answer to last week's quiz question, the question was, what was the total number of faculty or number of teachers in India in 2021-22 as per the National Survey on Higher Education? The answer is close to about 16 lakh. That brings us to the end of this episode. If you enjoyed what you saw, please do not forget to like, share and subscribe. Until we meet again next week, have a lovely time ahead.